April 23rd, 2020. I uploaded my first devlog for a new project that I had started working on. It was my first game with Unity, and it looked like, well, it looked like beans. The shooting animation was broken, and I hadn't found out what progrids was, so the boxes that made up the stage were floating slightly above the ground. And the bullets clipped through both the wall and the players almost as often as they actually hit them. A lot has changed since then. 33 devlogs have changed, counting this one to be exact. Despite its flimsy, bean-shaped Carlson-inspired foundations, I've been able to grow this game into a somewhat presentable pile of menus, low-poly trees, and 10 million long-line scripts. Couch Combat is my game, and it is a split-screen FPS with short, chaotic rounds. In between every round, you and your friends vote on a modifier to add to future rounds. These modifiers all stack and increase the chaos of the game over time. And if you would like to support the game, then please wishlist it, as it would be super helpful for whenever it releases. But in this video, I'm going to be finishing what I started in that strangely edited devlog 2 years ago. This is the final devlog for Couch Combat, and the game is coming out in just around a week, on July 12th. It'll be $10 on Steam, and it'll be available for PC, Mac, and Linux. On to what I've been doing for these last few weeks. I'm trying to tie everything completely together into a finished product for Steam, and so that means revisiting old systems and things to try to get everything up to the same level of completeness. So I went back to the old rules menu, which I completely forgot about. If you also forgot about the rules menu, and I wouldn't blame you, it basically just lets you choose some more settings for arcade mode before you start playing. For instance, you can choose if you want to play infinite rounds, or a set number of rounds, or if you want the game to end after somebody hits a certain amount of wins. These settings all function, so I just went back and updated the UI and added a few more quality of life features to it, and also gave it a visual overhaul to match the rest of the menus. Finally, I added in the functionality for options in the classic game mode. In the classic game mode, you go for loops where you select modifiers that are stacked onto the game, and then eventually these modifiers are reset. The only option that I ended up coming up with for classic mode was letting you choose how many rounds are in between each reset. The rules menu is not a super interesting part of development, but it is still an important part of making the game work at parties and letting you play it the way you want to. So I'm glad that it's back to not completely sucking. The settings menu has been pretty glitchy for a while, so I've just started on fixing some of those glitches. For instance, I made it easier to click some of the buttons that sometimes would be like weird of colliders, and I also made it so you consistently go up and down at a slower speed instead of it kind of being random. That way it's way easier to navigate the settings menu. If anybody has any ideas for settings that I should add to the game, then please comment them down below or in the Discord server, as I need to know which settings are needed before I release the game. As usual, 90% of my time went to the smallest things. These things seem like they would take 10 seconds to implement, but usually end up taking way longer. For example, I've decided to add a screen that says clearing modifiers when modifiers are cleared, as this wasn't very clear. Get it? In order to do that, I had to update several animations, and also change several parts of the script that manages moving in between scenes, and I also had to actually make the clear screen work. It wasn't fun, and it ended up taking a lot of time and bug fixing. But if you multiply that process times 1000, you have software development in a nutshell. Another thing that I decided to implement after going through playtesting several times was adding some exclamations into the game. And I started this by making a pop-up that plays at the beginning of the round the first time that you go to an area. This exclamation just gives a basic overview of the unique mechanics of the area. But the bigger thing that I'm still working on as of this devlog is a how to play screen, where you can review these tips as well as read about controls, the game loop, modifiers, and other stuff. Obviously, a normal linear tutorial does not fit my game well, and so I think that this method of teaching should be helpful to those who need it, and out of the way for everybody who doesn't need it, or for everybody who just prefers to do things incorrectly forever, rather than sit through 10 seconds of exclamation, like me. The art style of the game has not changed very much since I finalized it way back in devlogs 15 and 16. There are very few textures in the game, and instead I just stuck with flat colored, low poly models. It's not incredible, but it is easy on performance, fast to make, and it still looks pretty nice. But I figured that I'd make one tweak to it before releasing the game. In recent thumbnails, I've added eyes to the characters to make them more expressive, so I figured that I would add these eyes in-game as well. So I made some expressions in Photoshop, 4 different neutral faces, a happy face, and a dead face. When you drop in on a player, they are assigned a random one of the 4 neutral faces. This makes them all stand apart more, and the other faces happen in response to events in the game. The happy one in particular plays whenever you get a kill, while the hurt one plays whenever you get hurt, and the dead one is on ragdolls. The ways that these faces work is pretty simple. I just make them a transparent material for a plane that goes over the player's face and is shaped like their face. Here the faces are in action. They even blink. Another fun change that I made was adding a bunch of random things to the menu, And I mean literally random things. When you boot up the game, there are several objects that have a random chance of spawning in the main menu. This adds to the overall goofiness of the game, as the menu was feeling pretty sterile compared to the rest of the game. Some of the things that can spawn are props from different stages, characters doing different animations, and other stuff like that. And the animations for the characters are all straight from Mixamo, by the way, as I'm pretty lazy. The gunplay currently relies very heavily on aim assist, and so there is very little actual aiming on controller. This is especially annoying when you get aim locked on something that you don't actually want to be aiming at. So I made a few slight adjustments. First off, I turned down the strength of aim assist by default, but I made the hitboxes bigger. They're still not huge, but you can now miss just a bit and still deal damage. I think giving the player a little bit more of a margin of error instead of aim locking them onto other players is better, and so I think this improves it a little bit. I also made aim assist be half strength whenever you aren't changing where you're looking, which just makes it a little bit less noticeable whenever you aren't really using it. And I think that all these tweaks should improve the gunplay a bit. In my opinion, it's very hard to make any FPS feel good on controller, as they really don't work well, but I'm still trying my hardest to make my game feel good with controller. Finally, I decided that the game needed just one more gun to round everything out. I added a burst rifle to the game a long time ago, but I wasn't happy with its feel or animations at all, so I removed it back then. I'm bringing it back, but rebuilt from the ground up. The gun is modeled after an M16, as I already have an AK in the game. But I'm going to refrain from actually calling it an M16, as I think that it's probably copyrighted or something. And here's the final gun. I quite like the feel and the animations and sound of it. It's fairly standard, but it suits its role and it helps fill out the list of guns. With the release of this devlog, I basically have nothing else left to do for the game other than bug fix and add rebinding. But I'm waiting a while to release it in order to have time to do other things. I need to further update the Steam page and get a final Steam build working and tested. I'm also going to do a lot more playtesting with this final version of the game, and I'll also make a new trailer. Overall, I just want to make sure that I have a polished final product on release. Another thing that I did was commission an artist to make an artwork for the cover of the game on Steam. The artist's name is Orange Capybara, and I'm really happy with how it ended up. You can check him out in the description. But what's in the future for the game? Well, I have a bunch planned. First off, I will probably be caught up in support and bugs fixes for the game for the first week or so after release. But after that, I plan on having at least one solid content update. I've got a bunch of ideas for weapons, stages, and modifiers which I would love to add to the game over time. I'm not going to spoil what these updates are though, and while the game should be a solid product on release worth $10, I would love to continue to build on the game in the future, especially if it does well in sales. Another thing that I would like to make is another long form video kind of like the ones I made for Amori and Undertale. But instead of talking about some other game, I'll talk about my game and my overall journey in game development in needless depth. One of my biggest influences and inspirations when it comes to devlogs is 2Click Phillips' series, The Game Development Journey, so I want to basically make my own version of that. Thank you to everybody for following me through the development of this game. It has been awesome to experience the growth of this YouTube channel as well, and there's no way that I would have gotten this far without the support that you all have shown me. I'd probably just procrastinated Catch Combat out of existence a few months into development. And on a final note, I plan on starting a new devlog series after Catch Combat, as I have more games to make. But there will probably be a decently sized break, and I might do some other smaller projects as well. Thank you for watching this video, and a big thanks to my Patrons. Bye.